And they're like, Mom, did you summit? Did you summit? I said, no, but I had success.
The first kind of thing that I had to learn as a new leader was just having that level of humility to be able to walk in the room as the least experienced person.
The relationship is more important than the actual activity that happened.
What I really want is for somebody to go, yeah, he was the best guy that I ever worked for.
Hi, friends. So today I have the guest Anthony LaVopa on. He's a naval commander in the military and a friend of mine, so listen in. Hi, friends. Today I have my friend and guest on the podcast named Anthony LaVopa. Hi, Anthony. How are you?
Hey, Jen. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited to have you on. And we're going to release this episode right around Veterans Day because that's so appropriate because you serve in the U.S. Navy as a naval officer. So thank you for your services and keeping our country safe.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Yes. So tell us, how did you get into the Navy? Like, what is that progression?
Yeah, so oddly enough, I don't come from a military background. No parents in the military, no nothing. My godfather served some time in the Army, but I was just a kid growing up in Maine on the water. We always had a boat, and so the Navy kind of just naturally crept into my life. There was a period of time I thought I wanted to fly and be a pilot, and then that kind of faded, and my love for boating and ships kind of took over, and I was lucky enough to be the recipient of a naval ROTC scholarship my senior year of high school to Virginia Tech. And that's where my Navy journey started almost 20 years ago. And here I am, and we're still going.
I love it. Now, what is retirement? I thought retirement was you were in for 20 years, then people typically retire.
Yeah, so 20 years is the minimum for kind of get your, what people think of as a traditional military retirement. So I've got 15 years of active duty service. I spent 5 years doing ROTC and in college. And so this is the only thing that I have known in my adult life is the Navy. And so we've got another really exciting 5 years ahead of us as a family and some really exciting things in the Navy. And then I don't know, we'll see where life takes us after that.
Okay. And you're in the US now, but you've been on ships and you're going on a ship. Do you know when exactly?
Yeah, my next ship, I should get there probably around the end of 2024, beginning of 2025.
Okay. And how do they decide that?
Well, you kind of just put in your list of preferences. They send you a sheet and they ask you to rank your ship class or ship type and home port preference. For Christine and I, home port was something that we valued the most, and so Rota Spain was our number one choice. And I guess the odds worked in my favor, as they would say in the Hunger Games. And so we were lucky enough to get a ship in Rota, and we're so excited.
So, what is the training like now so that you're prepared for that then?
So I'm currently a student at Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. I'll graduate next March, and then I'll have a little bit of leftover time to finish up a fellowship with one of the advanced research programs at the War College that I'm doing. So that'll finish up in about June. And then I'm looking at about 8 to 9 months worth of training between then and when I'll actually show up to the ship. And it's everything from tactical training to ship driving to kind of some weapon system familiarization, refamiliarization, kind of, dabble in everything before I go back to the ship.
How does that feel? Like, are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you ready? Are you like, just get this done?
Yeah, I think it's a good combination of all of those things. There is, having commanded a ship already, there is no other equivalent feeling. And some of my peers would say, or oftentimes you'll hear people talk about the burden of command, and it's definitely not a burden. It's absolutely a privilege to command a ship in the Navy and command a crew. And my crew from USS Hurricane was absolutely remarkable. I mean, just I think the average age was probably 21, 22 at a lot of brand new sailors, and just their tenacity, their ingenuity, their desire to just go out and learn and do things is just it's awesome. And that's the best part about being in command, is just seeing your sailors excel. Nervous and excited, I think both. There's always a lot to learn. Technology changes. There's always things to catch up on. The principles always remain the same. But I think a lot of that nervousness just comes from, how well can I do? How do I make sure I do my best for my crew, for the Navy, for my family? So I think it's a good, healthy a mix of all those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is healthy to have a mix of all those things in anything that we're pursuing. Okay, so coming now, when you go back, or I guess for the first time, does any of your crew or any of your sailors come with you from previous expeditions? It's always new.
No, I mean, there's always a chance that somebody could be on the ship I'm going to that I worked with before. That's certainly always a possibility, but it's not like the Navy calls up and says, "Hey, Anthony, give us your list of people that you want to take with you." It doesn't work that way. So, you always catch, what's the saying? You catch more flies with honey. Yeah. So, just got to try and be nice to everybody. You never know. It's a small Navy, and you always end up interacting with people at least more than once.
And how many people will be in your command when you're there?
So I'll be headed to a destroyer. So roughly 300, 320, somewhere in there.
Okay. And what is a destroyer? Like, I'm not military, so and I'm sure most of my people listening are not military. So I'm going to ask like questions that you're going to think, what? How are you asking this?
Yeah, so good question. So a destroyer is really the Navy's primary surface platform for warfighting. It's what we call a multi-mission ship. So it does surface warfare, air warfare, strike warfare. So a lot of times people see destroyers when you turn on the news. If we're launching missiles into Syria, or when we launch missiles into Iraq or Afghanistan, most of those missiles came from a destroyer. So it's kind of the workhorse of the Navy. The surface force, at least, that's out there now. And it's a well-equipped ship. It's designed to go do a lot of different things. So it's really versatile, and it's really fun to drive.
Okay. And when you're stationed in Spain, will you stay mainly in those waters, or do you have missions or expeditions that you're going on that you already know of?
Yeah, it I'll say that it varies. We do things all over the world. Naturally, we're a global Navy, and so the ship will go wherever the Navy needs us to go, and that can be anywhere.
Okay. And when you're in command, like obviously your whole family's going with you to Spain at this time. How often will you see them? Will you be on the ship and they'll be on land? Will you get off the ship to hang out with them on land?
Yeah, we'll have periods where we're gone for a particular amount of time, and then we'll come home to kind of reset the crew, do a bunch of maintenance, things like that. And so those days when it's just a kind of a normal in-port work day, go to the ship during the day, come home in the evening, and then yeah, we'll have periods of time where I'm away, and you know there's always some challenges when dad leaves.
Yeah, because you have two little ones.
I do. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So, and now 5 and 2. They'll be older, obviously, when we get there in a couple of years. So, yeah, and it's the dynamic changes for them too. I mean, they're now accustomed to dad being home every day, and I'm home at night, and I put people to bed, and in the off chance that Christine gets 10 extra minutes to sleep in, I can get breakfast going. And so when they get out of that routine and I'm not here, or if I went away for a weekend or did some travel recently, they were like, "What's going on? Where's dad? Why, mom, why are you here? Dad doesn't do it this way." Like, so yeah, it's always a little bit of a circus.
No, it is. They have this idea, right? They get so ingrained into a system and habit, and then all of a sudden one thing changes and they're going to be your first police officers. Wait a minute. This isn't how it works, right? It's kind of like what our bodies do when we're trying to establish new habits. It says, wait a minute, this isn't normal. I don't know if we like this or not. We're going to make this uncomfortable to make sure you really, really, really want to make this change.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, anything from just waking up earlier to, any new habit you're trying to create, it's always met with some kind of resistance, either internal or external. And then I think, that's part of just what helps you decide if you want it to be a habit or if it's just if it's a fling. Like I'm gonna wake up early to go work out. Okay, well, if you do it 2 days and you're done, it's not a habit. But if you're doing it 6 months later, then yeah.
Right. Well, it's got to be hard to establish habits in the military because you always have to be ready to go and change and shift and be on the boat or at home or do these different pieces. How have you been able to adapt to all of that?
I am 100% a creature of habit. I have a routine. I stick to a routine. When I get out of my routine, it gets me like a little bit not anxious, but just I have that desire to stick to a routine. And so I think it's really two pieces. One, on the family side, the routine um, helps us as a family to be able to make those transitions. And yeah, whenever you're attached to a ship, there's always a hey, I thought I was going to be home this weekend. We're going to be away. Those things happen sometimes, and that's just the nature of our profession. And then the same is true as as a captain or a department head or a leader at any level on board the ship. Is how do you help your sailors manage their routines and manage their personal lives to be able to absorb those things, right? Especially for younger sailors, where perhaps both. Um, uh, Sailor and spouse are active duty. So then there's questions about childcare and how do we get through that? And so kind of all of these things that, to some degree are written down, but there's the level of, intrusive leadership required at many levels to understand your sailors and how to best help them, not just in the daily goings on, but how do you make sure that they're ready um, to be able to support the ship and get underway at times when perhaps it wasn't originally anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of you want a system to stay anchored into who you are and what you're doing, but it has to be adaptable because of the nature of your profession.
Exactly.
So when you go to Spain, how long will you be there for? 2 years, 3 years?
Yeah, it'll be about a 3-year tour for us, plus or minus a few months. So I'll spend about 18 months as the ship's executive officer, the number two person in command. And then I'll come back to the States briefly for a little bit of school, and then go back to the ship for notionally an 18-month command tour. So 36, probably 40 months somewhere in there, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah, because then you can stay in or then you can leave, right? Because you're almost going to be at your 20 years then.
Yeah, it'll be a decision point for sure for Christine and I, and sometimes it's just so hard to think that far away, um, and you know our children are absolutely the apples of our eye, and so they'll be old enough by then that we can involve them in the conversation a little bit more, and if they kind of feel tapped out, then maybe that's a signal for dad. Or there's other things. There's lots of things to do in the military that we can go do in one place and avoid the moving around, and so there's lots of options. So I think we're trying to keep all doors open at this point, and the Navy always has something really exciting to offer, especially things that you least expect. And so I think trying to stay open minded for us is the key.
Yeah. Yeah. All of us staying open minded, having an idea, but allowing it to unfold and taking it when it's there with all the options that present themselves. So, what made you decide? Because I'm like, again, terrible at military, so sorry, but what made you decide to do Navy and instead of Marines?
I honestly never considered the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps, their units are, I would say, more akin to what you would see in the Army in terms of infantry, field artillery, things like that. Of course, they have aviation as well. But for me, I think it was ships and boats was where my passion lies, and so that I think was the most impactful for me.
Okay. So the big part is the ships, just like the Air Force, the big part is the planes versus Army.
Right. Yep.
That makes sense to me. Okay, so I asked you, could you tell me about a significant personal journey, an experience that has shaped who you are?
Yeah, when I first came in the Navy, I was really fortunate that I had a great chief petty officer and a great division of sailors. And so, you come in and, you just finish your academic education, you just commission. And so you've got all this, book knowledge for me, which was civil engineering. And I really enjoyed that, but it wasn't going to be mostly practical to my everyday job. And so, the first kind of thing that I had to learn as a new leader was just having that level of humility to be able to walk in the room as the least experienced person and say, okay, I'm here, I'm new, I'm an open book. You guys, show me, tell me. I write stuff down. I'm old school. I carry my notebook. I write stuff down in a calendar. I don't use my phone a lot, and and that was kind of step one of my Navy career. And every single one of the sailors that was in my first division as the electrical officer, I still keep in touch with. Each of them is now either a senior chief petty officer. Some have gone on to commission as limited duty officers. So now they're kind of officers, but they're technical experts in their field of engineering. And so it's been great to continue to keep in touch with them over the years. And then as I became a little bit more senior, lieutenant commander, and I went back to sea again as a department head. That's kind of the time in your career where fighting the ship is the most important thing that you do. And so I spent a lot of time um, inside of the combat center on the ship, learning the weapon system, training, reading the tactics, applying the tactics. And I mean, when I say a lot of time, probably 1,500 hours sitting there, on watch, doing all those exercises and things that we go do for training as a ship. And so that is kind of the meat and potatoes, I would say, of department heads, is really getting familiar and understanding the tactical level, um, how to fight the ship. And then, I transitioned from that and I went to command as a lieutenant commander. And so you kind of take all of those things and squish them together as the captain. And you just have that overall responsibility and accountability for everything that happens on the ship. And, earlier I alluded to some people talk about it as a burden, but for me, it was a privilege. And there was no better feeling sometimes than, when my sailors would come up to me and say, hey, sir, I'm trying to get this done, but I can't get this paperwork past so-and-so, or I can't get an appointment at medical. And okay, cool, no problem. And I will say, like, when you pick up the phone and you say, hey, this is, Lieutenant Commander so-and-so, I'm the commanding officer of USS whatever, that always gets some people's attention. And it was just a great way to be able to outwardly show my sailors that the things that matter to you matter to me. And if it's gonna make your life better and it's gonna improve your quality of life as a sailor, as a human being, then I'm 100% on board to help. So um, I've been really lucky with the amount of people I've interacted with in my career, and I've been really fortunate to have some really great senior mentors, some of whom are very senior captains or admirals now, and just the opportunity to continue to learn from them, communicate with them on a routine basis, have that kind of opportunity to say, hey, sir, hey, ma'am, I've got this issue. This is what I think. Can I get your opinion? And I did that a number of times in command, and every single time I picked up the phone, I felt like whether it was a 30-second conversation or 30-minute conversation, it was always, I walked away thinking, wow, I'm so glad that I picked up the phone and asked. And I think that's probably true in life in general. I think sometimes leaders have this barrier to saying, I don't know, and people are looking at you like, well, you're the captain, or you're the CEO, or you have to know. That's why you're in that job. No, I mean, so, sometimes I'm not the most experienced person in the room when it comes to that particular thing, but I may know the right people to ask, or I may know the right questions to ask, right? And so again, as a leader, as a captain, as a CEO, that's why you have a board. That's why you have department heads. When When you have an engineering question, you turn to the chief engineer and you say, hey, chief engineer, you know, this is what I think, but give me your professional opinion, right? CEOs turn to lawyers and accountants when they have big business decisions, because you look at the people that have that expertise, and it's not always the most senior person in the room. And so I think for sailors to sometimes see that in their leaders, for them to say, hey, I don't know, that's a really great question. Let's go find out, right? Let's take a pause. Let's table this till later, and let's go spend an hour or two kind of digging through references, or let's make some phone calls, or what have you. I think that's just a good life lesson, is just be honest with your people, and I don't know sometimes is an okay answer.
Yeah, right. Being okay with the I don't know, and knowing that that gives you space to figure it out and to make sure and to recruit the necessary resources you need to get the answer that you require. I like that. Now, you've done a lot with your career, and now you are trying to get into the speaking world and share a lot of the lessons that you're learning from speaking. So, what's one of your favorite headlines that you talk about when you're out there inspiring civilians?
So, one of the one, again, I'm a simple guy, public education, public university, and I love the water and ships. So, kind of the concept that I've started working on since January that I've been here is, I call it your leadership wake, and it's owning the accountability of the decisions that you make and the people you impact. And again, visually for me, life and your legacy is your wake. And so as you look out the back of the boat and you see that beautiful wake behind you, all of your decisions and the people that you've met and interact with in life lie in that wake. And so, do you go through life in a meaningful way? And when you meet people, do you have meaningful interactions with them? Meaning you can kind of dial up, dial down your level of intensity. Do you personalize your relationship with them, or do you kind of just go through life, with your hand on the throttles, and you just tell people, hey, this is who I am. If you don't like it, take it or leave it, but I'm going to keep going without you. And for me, that's one of the lessons that I learned as a department head early on, as a young lieutenant. I come from an Italian background, and talking with my hands and talking loudly is genetic. And so I had to learn how to taper some of those genetic tendencies talking to people, because my initial reaction to things was always to go a little bit high and a little bit right. And again, I worked for some really fantastic captains who, kind of just showed me some other tools, and I had some fantastic peers along the way that had almost the opposite type of personality. So I got to see the other side of the coin and kind of, again, adapt my leadership style to the people I'm working with. And so, I think one of the things that I think about often is, at some point the Navy journey is going to end for me, and then there will be something after that, right? But when I get older and I get to the point of sitting on my front porch in my summer home in Maine, looking at the water, and I start just reminiscing and thinking about life and the legacy that I'm leaving, what things do I want people to remember me by? Is it the things that I did, or is it the way that I made people feel? And so the things that I did, I think, are natural, right? People will say, yep, he was in the Navy, he was a dad, he was a husband, da da da. But what I really want is for somebody to go, yeah, he was the best guy that I ever worked for, my favorite captain, the best captain, the most talented captain, or he was the one that helped me the most in my career. Or I want my children to look back and go, he was definitely the best dad, not because he's my only dad, but these are all of the things that he did for me. And for Christine too, her, after going through life with somebody, what a horrible thing to get to the end and go, well, I kind of wish that would have been better, And so and it's not something that you can, I think, wait until many years from now to ponder and try and go back and fix. And so I've kind of developed this leadership wake thing. And it seems to be sticking with people. And I've got some really good feedback. And then the other piece of it is, kind of taking control of your life, again, using the ship as the visual, but how do you want to steer your ship, yourself, your legacy, and what do you want to put in your legacy, right? And the one example that I used last week talking to a couple of college kids was financial freedom and whatnot, right? When you graduate college, do you want to go buy that really nice car and show people like, hey, look at this car I got, but now I've got a $900 a month car payment, and I'm still living in my parents' basement, and or do you steer yourself away from that and go, hey, what's the best decision I can make? Again, let me consult people that are mentors and coaches and leaders and people who have made those mistakes already, so I don't just make the same mistakes all over again.
Yeah, no, and I like a couple of the things that you said, especially with the leadership wake, just being conscientious of how am I making people feel? What kind of impact am I having? It's not just what we achieve, it's who we are as individuals. And I remember coming back from a mountain that I didn't summit. And I came home, and the kids came home a few days after I did because they were at summer camp. And they're like, Mom, did you summit? Did you summit? I said, no, but I had success. And they looked at me all puzzled, like, what do you mean you didn't summit, but you still had success? And I said, I didn't summit the mountain, but we had a tragedy happen on our team, and I took care of my team, and I showed up as somebody that I was proud of. And it's more important to be good people than it is for us to achieve these significant things. The mountain's always going to be there. So what are you doing in that process? And so I really like how you're walking people through that so that they sit and reflect and kind of think about that. And then another thing that you mentioned was, you have this relationship with Christine, and you're like, I want this relationship to be good or great, but I'm not waiting till the end to make sure that is the truth. I'm checking in on a regular basis and being like, is this activity bringing us closer or making our relationship stronger, or is it separating us or sending us in different paths that we don't want to do? And if you're intentional about how you live and check in and be honest with reflections and say, oh, you know what? That didn't work like we thought. Let's reel that in and go a different direction. Or guess what? That was more fun, or that was something that we want to pursue more of. The earlier you catch these wins or redirections, I don't know if I call them losses, but like redirections, and say, oh, this didn't work out like we wanted, but now we can course correct before we're all the way across the globe. You have a lot more opportunity to have those relationships with people that you desire.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that I've learned in talking to people, both in the military and out of the military, is people really struggle with what one of my mentors would call defining the win. What does success look like, right? And using you as an example, success is certainly getting to the summit, but there's other sub bullets of success that you can still hit even if you don't get to the summit. And so I think sometimes, especially for people that are younger than me that I've talked to, they either have 0 or 100 as their metric of success, not realizing that, okay, 100 is good, whatever that is, but what does it take to get there, right? You can't go from just 0 to 100. You've got to build over time. And so, are you gonna get halfway up and then take 2 steps back? Yeah, probably. That's a lot. That's a lot of life, and just personal interactions. I mean, Christine and I, we're both type A people. She is, an entrepreneur and founder of her own business. I have my profession, and sometimes those two things don't jive well. And especially in the last year, as her business has just completely blown up and taken off, there's been days where it's like, well, who's the priority? Like, who's more important? Is it me? Is it you? Are we equally important? I don't know. Normally, most of the time, I probably get it wrong. And most of the time, there's some flowers and cards involved, but again, I think that's part of life, and some of the humility of going back to say, hey, you know what? I thought I was the most important thing in town, but now that I look back on last week, like, no, I totally should not have done X, right? Because you needed to do Y.
Well, and that's like a great leadership skill in and of itself, being able to say, like, hey, I ruptured this whole thing, but now you're repairing, right? So where did it go wrong? What broke? How are you responsible for that piece? And how do we repair it? Because the relationship is more important than the actual activity that happened that we learned from, right? So I love that you guys do that. And I love how you said, define the win. Like, define what the win is. When I was going to climb in Antarctica, I was going to have to be gone over Christmas. Like, my family's favorite holiday, my favorite holiday is Christmas all day long. 7 kids at Christmas is magic. And I remember telling this company, like, hey, I want to climb. I definitely want to do this mountain, but I cannot go over Christmas. So, like, I can leave December 26th, but I'm not leaving December 25. And they came back and they said, hey, you can go, you can have the one permit we issue, but you need to leave December 18 and you will not be home till January 9. And I wanted to say no, like right then and there. I'm like, nope, never mind, didn't work. But I thought, you know what? My kids have been on this journey with me. This is a joint decision. I need to at least present it to them. And so I like called a family event. We all sat down and I said, hey, mom got offered to go, but she's going to miss Christmas. It's my favorite holiday. It's all of our favorite holidays. And before I could go any further, one of my sons says, Mom, you've always told us Christmas is a feeling, not a day. Why does it matter what day we celebrate Christmas on? And then my young kids who are like quick to understanding kind of what's going on, like, does this mean we get 2 Christmases? Because they have friends that get 2 Christmases. They don't understand why they get 2 Christmases, but they're kind of bummed that they get one. And it was one of those things where we decided as a family, like I was going to go do the quest. We were going to celebrate Christmas early. And this worked for us. And I needed that win defined because let me tell you, the public, not a fan. How could you do this? You're so selfish, blah, blah, blah. All the hate came out full speed ahead. And it didn't bother me because the people that I cared about most, we knew. We knew what the plan was. We knew what the strategy was. We talked through it. We were committed. We were good. And so a lot of times I think we get lost in the noise of the world. But when you have that win defined between you and the most important people in your life, you can let that storm go and not get caught up in it because you know what the win is. So I love that you brought that piece up.
Yeah, and the noise of life is so easy to get caught up in. And you're right, but one of the things that I've really had to learn in the last few years since having kids is the balancing of priority between Navy and family. And much of my Navy time is demanded of me. It's not asked, and that's okay. But sometimes, especially now that I'm going back to command, I've been in the organization for a little bit. I've kind of learned some of the nuances of, when do I really need to push back on some of this versus when do I just need to tell my family, hey, I'm sorry. This is an immovable thing, and we're just going to have to do the best we can. So let's figure out how to do that, right? But that's a Christine and the kids conversation. I don't get caught up in what other people are doing or what other people think, or you know whatever the case may be. But to the same point, I think from a leadership perspective, one of the things that I talk to people about sometimes is what are the things that only you can do in the role that you have, right? And whether it's captain, department head, dad, husband, you know, chief financial officer of the household, whatever, the many different jobs that I have, there are certain things that only I can do, right? I can't delegate that responsibility or authority to somebody else. Only I can be a father to my kids and spend time with my kids. I can tell Christine, hey, go spend time with the kids, and she will, but they're not spending time with me, right? There's only certain pieces of paper that the captain is authorized to sign or can do. And so do those things first. Again, another lesson that I learned early from a really good former captain of mine, right? Do the things that you have to do, and then everything else, prioritize. I use the Eisenhower matrix. If people are familiar with that, I love it. I love Eisenhower. one of my favorite people to read about, just a completely brilliant man, fantastic leader. And the Eisenhower matrix, sometimes when you just, print a copy off, start writing things down. And when you start putting things in the block of like not a priority and, it ends up in the do not do category, sometimes you just look at yourself like, what am I stressing about? Like, this is a no brainer. And then you find that the things that you have to do, they're very few, that things that you have to do that only you can do. But I've often found that if you take care of those things that only you can do, the rest kind of sorts itself out. And I think people that work for you or people that are around you, they notice that over time. Hey, the captain makes sure that he's home every day for dinner with his family because that's a priority. So what is the, intended or unintended message to the rest of the crew? Hey, spending time with your family is a priority. And there were days when I was, on the PC where I would have to peel people away, like my chief engineer who lived right down the block. Will, go home and spend time with Kate and the kids. We can do more paperwork tomorrow. Um, and again, people just get into that grind of like, hey, I'm vibing, I'm doing great at work, I'm really like into it. Great. But there comes a point where you just have to say, okay, cool. I've filled this cup. Right now I need to go home and fill my family cup with my kids, spend time with my spouse, do that, make sure that those cups are full because tomorrow the cups start empty again and we got to fill all the cups again.
I like that analogy. It gives you a visual. Being like, okay, here's all the categories I care about. Am I filling each one of these cups? And you're even bring it to the point, am I doing it each day? Right? Like, how does that look each day? For me, I have to look at it about on a weekly schedule just because of how many kids I have and what's going on. But having those check-ins, whatever they look like for you, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, that gives us a reality check on, are we showing up the way we intend to show up? Because sometimes there's a gap in those two.
Well, one of the things that always bothered me as a leader is somebody would say, well, I'm going to give you 110% of my effort. I don't want 110% of your effort. I just want 100% of your effort and your focus when it's required. Right. So going back to the water in the cup analogy, the pitcher of water that you're pouring out of is your energy and your focus and your calories for one day. And if you're at work, you can keep pouring in the smaller cup that's the work cup, but eventually the water starts coming out of it because the cup is full. And so now you're just wasting calories and energy and brain power and emotion. And so can I spend those things in a better place? Well, hey, my family cup isn't full, so let me go home and use calories and energy and excitement with my family instead of just continuing to pour water in the work cup and that's already full.
Right, right. That's fantastic. Okay, so you, as a commander, you have this huge team that reports to you and looks up to you. How do you deal with delegation? Like, how do you say, okay, because I get stuck in this sometimes. Like, I'll get stuck in saying, like, I can do this so much better than everybody else, so I might as well do it. Now, obviously, that's taking time from other things that I'd rather be doing, but I can get lost in that loophole. So, how do you manage the delegation piece and building that teamwork up?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something that I am not a natural delegator. I have 100 things to do. I will do all 100. I will do them all with 100% effort. So again, violating my cup rule that I just talked about, that's me. I'm a habitual cup spiller everywhere. So I learned as a department head, there is just too many things to do for one person to manage it all. Um, and I learned that really the foundation of delegation is trust, right? There's trust and there's training. You have to trust people to do things perhaps in a way that you would not do them, but you also owe them the training and the teachable moments of how to do whatever the task is, right? And so then as a leader, it requires you to transition your thought process from output to outcome. And the outcome at the end of the day is this task should be done or this thing should be better or whatever it may be, but it's not necessarily does the spreadsheet look this way, or did somebody put the PowerPoint together this way, right? All of those things in my mind, that's just micromanagement, which is its own form of leadership that I try not to subscribe to. And so moving the ball forward when I had command, I'm looking at my chiefs and my department heads of, hey, these are the things we need to do. Weapons officer, you own this stuff. Chief engineer, you own this stuff. Did they bring me stuff sometimes that you just look at and you're like, I don't know what is this? I didn't ask for this. But again, then I always point back at myself as a leader to say, one, was I clear in the communication that I gave and the expectations of what I was looking for? And two, did I take time either then or previously to show people exactly what it was that I was looking for or how to do this? And 98.7% of the time it was, me looking at myself in the mirror going, hey, Captain, you weren't clear in your communication, or you didn't really show them how to do this. You just said, I need a rock, go get me a rock. And they bring you a rock. You're like, well, that's not the rock I asked for. And they're like, okay. And so for me, the delegation piece is about trust and training. And as a leader, you have to be willing to take some of the risk there to say, yeah, they may not do it right, or we may not turn this in on time, or, my boss is not going to like the first draft, or whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, is it really worth like yelling and screaming and coming to blows about? No, it's not. And so if you can plan ahead of time, right? And you allow your team the opportunity to do it, and you assume that the first time they do it, maybe it'll be a 60% success rate, and you've already built in that timeline to say, hey, okay, now I need to sit down and provide some more guidance, or let's review and refine as a group. Hey, easy day. But yeah, delegation is something that people often ask about, and I think it's training and it's trust, and you just have to be willing to let your people shine in their own way.
Yeah. And I do feel like the military does a good job at having structure, right? It has these lines of commands and these different structural pieces. So then it helps you understand the framework that's needed to do the delegation. Like you just, like when you're talking about it, like we have the weapons person, you have this person, you have that person. Okay, when you start defining these different roles, then that helps with the delegation piece because people understand, okay, here's my area of expertise. This is what I'm bringing to the team. And then also as the leader, that communication piece, right? Communicate, communicate, communicate. You can almost never over communicate because that's how you guys get in sync and deliver and perform the way that each party expects.
Yeah, and I worked for a great captain who would often say, communicate about how you're communicating. And to me, that always spoke to what languages do people learn best in, right? Some people are readers, some people are visual, some people hear the best. And so again, are you communicating with your team in a way that's beneficial for everyone, or are you communicating with them in a way that's beneficial for you? And another example I'll use is, Christine and I have spent quite a bit of our marriage apart. And so we've become accustomed to communicating either via text, WhatsApp, or email. And sometimes I'm much more concise in my communication in email than I am in verbal conversation with her. So it's easier for her to sometimes process what it is that I'm getting after, because I'm just short and to the point in my email. Now the downside to that is tone and emotion, and those things don't come across that well sometimes in my written communication, and so then that creates some challenges sometimes too. So again, there's always, I think, from a leadership perspective of how can I communicate better with my team? And I'd always ask, my department heads or my division officers when I was a department head, how else can I help you? Or what things can I do better to help you? Because again, everybody learns differently. Everybody learns at a different pace. Some people need to have somebody sit there and go through something. So again, going back to the delegation, like step one, write this. Step two, do this. Some people just want you to hand them the whole enchilada and let them kind of, play with it and do it wrong, and then bring you something back and you go, okay, I don't know what this is, but let's sit down, and then they understand it better. So as a leader, it's understanding each of those unique things.
I'm learning that as a parent. I'm learning that as a parent. We did this thing called the 5 languages of love. And I had my kids take the quiz. And one of my sons is gifts. I'm not a gift person. Like, I feel like I could go buy something if I need it. So gifts aren't really my thing. So I didn't realize that gifts were his thing. I went to a hotel because I was giving a speech and I grabbed one of the pens at the checkout counter. I came home and I'm like, honey, I got this pen for you. And I was giving my speech in LA. He was so, I mean, he brings that pen to school right now, right? Like, he so loves me, felt seen, felt heard. So part of that communication piece is, in fact, understanding how does the other person receive, what are they doing, and all those little pieces that you talked about. So I love that we got a chance to hit on that because that's such a big component of leadership of ourselves and those that we care about.
Yeah, and it's huge. And in an organization like the Navy or the smaller organization of a ship, as the captain in front of 350 people, you might get, once a week, a couple times a month to kind of address the entire crew. And it's normally, before underway, at an award ceremony. So the things that you say and the message you put out when you've got 300, ish people looking at you has got to be, one, purposeful, right? People don't want the captain to just say, hey, have a great weekend, don't do stupid things, whatever. They want it to be meaningful because it's coming from the boss. But two, how do you craft that message in a way that you can reach all of those different styles of learning and absorption all at one time? And it's really, really challenging, right? And so the beauty of command and that aspect is sometimes you say something and then a couple of days later you're walking around and you hear the sailors talking and you stop and you're like, hey, what's going on, how's your weekend, da, da, da. And they're like, hey sir, we heard you said X. And you're like, really, when did I say that? And they're like, oh sir, last Friday you said. And you're like, no, that's not what I said. And then you tell them what they said, and then you kind of realize, either through the game of telephone or just the difference in transmit versus receive, how they interpreted what you said. You're like, and then, it causes a moment of reflection of, am I as good a communicator as I think I am? Or did I totally just goon that up? And now I need to, go do damage control because everybody thinks, we're taking, the next 2 weeks off or something. So that to me was always one of the best things about junior sailors, is they're so unfiltered. And when you see them and you ask, again, good leadership question or good leadership thing to think about. Don't ask people questions if you don't want an answer. And so when you ask junior sailors, like, hey, Seaman so and so, how was your weekend? And you get like a very detailed breakdown of, like, I went on a date and I did this, and you're like, well, okay, that's not kind of what I was going for, but all right, let me take this and run with it. But conversely, sometimes you get them to say some really good things about policy on board the ship. They'll say, hey, sir, I don't understand why you want us to do X. And then you hear it from their point of view. And again, I write it down in my little book. I go back to my cabin. I sit down and I think for a second, like, yeah, why are we doing that? That seems silly. Like, what a waste of time. Or like, can we change that? Who's responsible for changing that? Oh, wait, that's me. Sure, let's change it. That sounds like a great idea, right? And then you take that opportunity in front of the whole crew and you can say, hey, I was talking to Seaman so and so, and they asked me about X, and I didn't realize it was doing, this for the crew. So starting today, we're not going to do that anymore. And now you've solved the problem, and you've empowered those really junior sailors to say, hey, I said something to the captain and I made a difference for the other 299 people here. And now, now everybody's high fiving that guy, like, hey, this is great, whatever. Guy or gal, I should say, guy or gal.
No, you're good. I love it. I love it. You have so many lessons from your experiences, and they're so timely and effective for all of us civilians that are not doing such heroic things like you do on a regular basis. How do the listeners follow you? I know that you give speeches. I know that you'll work privately with people if they're fit for what you can offer. So where do we direct people that are listening today?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. There's so many great people out there. I mean, that's how you and I got connected. LinkedIn is it's just an encyclopedia in my mind of professional development. And, whether it's Simon Sinek or some other great authors out there that just post, 60 seconds worth of goodness. I love LinkedIn. I love everything about it. It's a fantastic platform. So reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me there. And, yeah, love it. I love talking to people. Love hearing their stories. Love helping people. As my friend would say, it's about waking up every day and making other people better. That's what life's all about.
Well, you definitely do that. So thank you for being a friend of mine, and thank you for sharing your story today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.